Hi everybody, welcome to All Games New and Old. I'm David Rodriguez.
I'm Hillary Rodriguez.
And today we are going to be reviewing The Witcher Old World. This is published in 2023 from CD Projekt Red and Go on board games and was designed by Lukasz Wozniak.
It's a 1 to 5 player game. It says it plays in 90 to 150 minutes. If it's a learning game, it's definitely going to take a lot longer than that. I think most of our games were about twice that length, so...
We definitely didn't do it in an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Never.
I think most of our games were 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah, I think that's right. The ballpark we were in, for sure. So this was a really big Kickstarter that fairly recently fulfilled. I got not quite the all-in because I didn't get like the metal coins and that sort of thing, but I got all the gameplay elements, all the expansions and whatnot. And my plan was for us to play all the expansions and then do a big review of that. The problem being, this game is long, and our time is short. Not just to play, but on this earth. But if we would have done this, it would have been like a month and a half down the road before we can even review this thing. And we would like to play other things. Too.
And we have a vacation coming up.
Yeah, and I say that not as a knock against The Witcher. It's just that I don't want to just play The Witcher for 2 months straight. Like, you got to break it up. So hopefully we can follow back up at some point and talk about some of the other expansions in a future video. But I wanted to get this out there so you knew, got an idea about the base game. And then we also played with the Mages expansion, which adds mages that you can play with. We played with the Monster Trails expansion, which adds various kind of new cards to the game. It lets you buy or lets you get bombs that you can use in battles. It adds some special cards to the Witcher action deck. It adds a special card for each individual Witcher or Mage that gets added to their starter deck. And it also has these mutagens, so your character basically gets like kind of an ongoing special ability that you can use once per battle whenever they go up a level. So and there's other things in that expansion that we didn't get into, like some things that give monsters strengths and weaknesses that it was just another level of complexity. I'm like, let's not do that. And we also played the Wild Hunt expansion, which makes it into a cooperative game. I did also play the game solo, which I'll touch on that a little bit as we get into it. But that's kind of the basic gist. I mean, it's the core of it's a deck building game. I should probably say, like, when you're playing competitively, at least with the expansions that we use, you're trying to be the first to get 4 trophies, which is either by winning fights with monsters or their witchers, or by being the first to get any specific attribute of yours up to the top level. Although you cannot win the game with having like your last trophy be from that. It has to be a fight. And then the cooperative game, there's a wild hunt, like big scary night guy running around, causing havoc, or unleashing hounds on the world, and you have to get powerful enough to defeat him by the end of 8 rounds. That's basically how it goes. So let's get to our opinion so you can know whether or not you should take a pass on this one or whether you should toss a coin to your friendly local game store.
So I think the artwork and the components in this game are really well done. There are female characters in the expansions. I don't think any of them are very overly sexualized like there can be in so many fantasy set games.
Yeah.
The cards are a good thickness. It was able to shuffle them and not feel like they were gonna bend right away. The models are really good quality. I think the Ciri model that we got, her sword was a little wonky, but I think, putting her in some warm water and just straightening it out will be fine.
Absolutely.
So I think that the models are gonna last a long time. So
I do too. They're really like, sometimes you get like these miniatures games and like the board games, and it's a little bit kind of a bendy plastic, or it's just not. It doesn't hold a lot of detail. Not the case here. They're all very detailed, nice, the stiffer plastic. Really fantastic sculpts. They try, it seems like, to match the pose of the sculpt with the picture that represents either the character or the monster, which is great, because when you have like a lot of monster miniatures, it helps to find the specific one, because these are all really just ugly. They're all ugly monsters. There's no pretty monsters in this game. They're all horrific. The player boards are awesome. I think they might even be like, I don't even think they're dual layer. I think they might be tri-layer. I'm not sure because there's even like a spot like underneath them to like slide your trophy cards, and then you have like places to put like a wooden cubes to show you how high level your attributes are, etc. Really, really nicely done. They do have what I think is the silliest component in all board games. I don't know if this is base set or if it's I don't know, but on the player boards, it has a little spot where their name is, right? The name of your character that can pull off, and there's also other little tokens that have names on it that you can slot in that space. So if you don't like the name that your character has on their player board, you could change it to something else. Is anyone going to do that? Like, is it necessary? Like, I cannot play as Darius. No, he must be named Wackadoodle. I don't know. I don't remember any of the names right now, except for Siri, who I already knew. Because that's how little that matters to me. And I'm a very themed person, but I really don't care what my character's name is, unless it's a really stupid name, but they're all fine. Like, there's nobody named Wackadoodle. If someone was named Wackadoodle, and that wasn't specific to how their character is, where it makes sense, I would probably change that name.
Yeah, like, I wouldn't bother me, having that as an option. In future plays, I might change out the character name just because it's an option. But it's definitely not something that needed to be done. Yeah. It's something that, cost extra time and money, so increase the game cost probably. But yeah, it's something that's, it's a cool aspect, but definitely not something that's needed.
Yeah, if it hadn't been there, I would have never, ever thought, God, I wish I could change the name of this.
Yeah.
Wouldn't happen. The names, maybe you'll hate the names. I don't know. Maybe you want to change. That's up to you. But bizarre. It's fine. It's a bizarre choice. It's just not necessary. The cards, I think they're really good quality. They felt like to me like they had a weird texture, not a bad texture, but it's like it's not. It didn't feel like the same as like a super smooth card. It wasn't the linen finish card. I don't know how to explain this. I don't know what it. And maybe I'm just crazy. Yeah. I don't know. But
I think what it is, like when we're playing with the card, all the different games that we've had, like it. I tend to notice that the linen finish cards seem thicker than the smooth finish cards, and these ones seem like they're the same thickness as the linen finish, but but they're smoother. Okay. So I think that might be what the difference is.
That could be, yeah, maybe so. Now, I could be wrong on this because honestly, I barely looked at what the base game was going to be because I'm like, there's no way I'm just going to get the base game. I think when you buy the regular, like, base retail copy, I don't think it has monster models. I think it just has tokens with their pictures on them, which is perfectly serviceable. I think it still comes with character models because there aren't character tokens. And that's, if you're not one of those people who does not like plastic miniatures anyway, that's probably fine. I mean, they've got good art on them. They're not huge, but they're serviceable. But I mean, personally, like having both options, I'm not gonna play just the tokens. Come on, the sculpts are amazing. I know I'm going back to that. We already touched on it, but they really are amazing. But the tokens are also fine. Like they are. Like I wouldn't hate it if I had to play with other models. Much. A little bit though.
Well, and with the tracking tokens, you actually prefer the cardboard over the plastic ones.
Yeah, there's these little tokens you have that you have in like a trophy board and other places too, depending on what mode of the game you're playing. But the plastic ones, I mean, they're just like a solid color, and I just don't think they look as nice on the board as the one that actually has like the printed like full color image of like your school or your I don't know if it's a wizard school. I can't remember how they. And whatever the symbol is for your wizard or witcher, it looks nicer full color. I guess you could paint them. I would have to have so little on my list of things I want to paint before I paint those things. I just don't think I'd bother. So,
Mage.
What?
Mage. You're saying wizard.
Oh, mage school, not wizard school.
Sorry, it doesn't bother me.
No, that's fine. Yeah, no. To me, they're interchangeable because of D&D. Sorry. Yes. Mage. They're mages. Now, you mentioned that there's women characters in the expansion. Mm-hmm. There are not women characters There are not women heroes in the base game. There's terrifying women. Some of them are monsters. And, you know, when they did this Kickstarter, some Kickstarters show you everything, and they're like, pick the stuff you want right away. And some of them are like, here's the base game, and then like a few days later, like, you could also add this, and you could also add this. And when they first did it, just the base game, I was like, I'm not going to get this. They didn't put a single, like, woman character in here. And now I am not a Witcher expert. I tried to look it up, and what I could find, and this may be inaccurate because I didn't like go looking for 15 different sources, was that there aren't female Witchers other than Ciri that have been in the books or anything, but there's also nothing in there that says that there can't be female Witchers. So, I think it's kind of lame that in order to get women in this game at all, you have to get an expansion. You have to get either the mages or the one with Ciri in it. Or there's just not women that you can play as. That's kind of lame. And even if it is the case that in the world of the video game, which is this is supposed to be based on the video game continuity, that like Ciri is just like an unusual circumstance. She's the only woman. And I understand that CD Projekt Red wants to keep it consistent with that world. Like, bend the rules. Like, bend them for things like this.
Yeah.
Honest to God. Just do it. It's not going to hurt anything. Just stick some in there. So it's not all male characters.
Yeah.
So, also, probably worth noting, judging by the art, if I'm not mistaken, I think they're all white folks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that could also be another thing where in the lore, maybe that because they're in a certain region, maybe so. Also, bend the rules. It's okay. Just bend them a little bit. This guy came from this other continent. See? Easy. Or whatever. Just bend the rules, man. Because, you know, make it cool for everyone who wants to play your game.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Just do it. It's worth it. You talked about how they did a good job of not making like the women overly sexy in this thing. The most scantily clad character, it's one of the mages, is creepy as heck. She's a necromancer. She has blackbirds like perched all over her, and she just, I'm gonna say that is not attractive to most people. Someone's probably would like a creepy bird woman. I don't know, but that's it. She's not like way scantily clad either. It's just you could see more skin on her because she's got like weird like black wrappings on. It's not sexy. It's not sexy. So yeah, they did good on that one.
One other component that we didn't really touch on is the dice.
Yes.
They are a set. There's 2 sets of 5 dice. They're the same dice. It's just different chromatics. One's black set and one white set. You play them for the dice poker game. The thing that I think that I like about them is that like they use different symbols for the different faces. But it like makes sense. So like there are Roman numerals on them as well. But there's also shapes. So like there's a circle for 1, there's 2 circles for 2, there's a triangle for 3, and kind of so on. So there's a shape that represents the number the face number that is showing. So
yeah, and I just really like those dice. I think they feel cool to roll, and you know, pair that with that you're trying to get like a good roll.
Yeah,
but they're nice to roll. Alright, so for theme, as I mentioned, this takes place in the continuity of the video game, not the books or the television show, but it takes place 100 years before the video game. I don't know how much that matters. I don't know if it matters to anybody. Like, I don't know if there's enough of a difference where someone who's only read the books would be like, this isn't right. You know, I have no idea about that. As I'm playing, I'm not like, this is so much the world of the video game. I played all of part 3, I played some of part 2, and I played very little of part 1, but other than like Ciri, who is actually just, you know, thrown in there as a cool bonus character that you can have, who looks like Ciri from the video game and not like from the show, there's nothing really immediately that I'm like, oh, this is, you know, totally the video game world. Like, I don't know how much that whole thing matters, to be honest, but there it is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't read the books. I only oversaw him playing the video games a little bit. I have watched the first 2 seasons of the show. I haven't been able to get to the 3rd one yet. So, you know, for me, it's like I don't know as much of the lore. It does seem weird to me that Ciri's in it, but none of the other characters are. But I think they did want to eventually get a female Witcher in there, so
yeah.
I'm glad that they did that.
Yeah, me too. So, one thing that I notice in a lot of adventure games I've played is there's usually either an overarching story, like they have to eventually deal with this bad guy or whatever, or there are things that come up during gameplay that aren't like necessarily like paragraphs that you read or whatever, but just like emergent things that happen because of how the game is played that create interesting stories. Like I still like talking about when I first played Hexplore and I had to find a giant pangolin or whatever because I think that's so bizarre and it was like an interesting thing for me. And that game, which we're not reviewing now, but has a lot of emergent stuff to it. Like things just happen in the game because of how that game is structured. This one, I don't feel like it has either of those, at least in the competitive one. There is no real overarching story. You're just trying to be the first person to get a certain number of trophies. So it's really like just this period in the life of some Witchers and or mages. And I don't feel like that much comes just out of gameplay as far as like a story goes. Now you do have exploration cards that do have paragraphs that have story in it, and it may give you a choice or make you take a test or whatever. And those are kind of cool, and I like them. It's just not quite what I'm talking about. Like, just in terms of the rest of the gameplay and the things that you're doing, there's not a lot of stuff that you're going to go back and, like, be like, oh, and this time I played it was so cool because I fought this monster and blah, 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 like this certain thing. To me anyway, the game didn't feel structured that way. And I've kind of come to realize that in adventure games, that's something I really like. Like, because I like the idea that if I meet someone else who's played, you know, whatever game, like, we're going to have different stories of what happened in that. And it's not just going to be like, yeah, I also fought the Harpy. It sure was close. Or no, it wasn't. Or whatever. Which is kind of what you get out of this one.
Yeah, I think, like, as far as theme goes, it almost makes me think, like, you know, like, a lot of adventure games are more like watching a movie where there's an overarching storyline. Where this feels more like a TV show, Monster of the Week TV show.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, you might have this cool battle that happens, but, you know, it's not something that, like, is gonna necessarily stay with you throughout other gameplays.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Now that being said, I'm not pooping all over this thing. Like, I think it's good. I like what's there. I do like kind of meandering about from town to town and, you know, investigating the forest or the town and having some choice in what I'm going to do because this person's being a jerk and I can deal with it this way or that way. That's all really neat. Like, I do like all that. So I don't want to sound like I'm overly complaining about that. And I do in general feel like this does fit the mood of a lot of the Witcher stuff where, you know, they are kind of just these travelers that go from town to town. Does this town need me to deal with a monster? Great, I'm gonna go do that and you're gonna pay me. Like, that's what they do. So it fits. I think it fits the theme fine. I really do, but I do wish there was a little more of that kind of, you know, like story that just comes out of the gameplay.
Well, and I do really appreciate the encounter cards because they all give you an option, so you can kind of decide what kind of player you're going to be. Most of the time there's kind of not necessarily an obvious right or wrong choice, but there's definitely some moral choices that you have on these cards, and so I think it's fun to be able to have those options at pretty much every round. So
yeah, one thing I will say that is a little weird sometimes is if you're playing with the mages, there's not like different cards for when you're searching with the mage. So it might be like, oh, this person notices that you're a Witcher, but you're not a Witcher, you're a mage. And your amulet is reacting, but you don't have that amulet because I'm a mage. Or whatever. There's things that you just kind of have to, like, yada yada away, be like, okay, well, close enough, I'm a mage, whatever. You know what I mean? It's not that big a deal. It didn't really bother me, but I was kind of like, it'd be kind of cool if there was, like, some mage-specific things that you could have in there, maybe, although that would mean more cards. There's so many cards. Sorting this thing took me like 2 days. Like it was
and then our 4-year-old came and messed it up. A few times.
Yep. I don't even want to look. Our last game we said is over there, and I don't know if it's our 4-year-old or the cat came and laid on it, but there's cards like all over the board. I found a miniature on a completely different table, which means that there may be miniatures I don't find on a completely different God knows what. A little nervous about that. Kids. That's okay. I'm writing this down, and that kid's going to pay me back when that kid gets a job. Be ready, kid. Wasn't a cheap game.
So overall, I do enjoy this game. It does bother me that there are no playable female characters in the base model. As a female gamer, like, I like being able to have a female character. I don't always pick a female character if I have the choice, but I like being able to have that choice. So that does bother me. I did enjoy the expansions that we played with. I think one of the things that's really interesting that we only played with it in the co-op version, but if you're playing as Witchers and Mages, there's actually 2 different decks. There's a deck for the Witchers and a deck for the Mages. But in the marketplace, they run side by side, and if you're a Witcher and you're picking a Witcher card, it gets rid of the Mage card that's directly across from it. So as a co-op, we were able to kind of talk about it and be like, hey, like, I really want this card. Is it gonna mess you up if I take that? Or, it could be like, oh, I'm deciding between these 2 cards, and so, like, yeah, go ahead and take this one instead that's lower down, because then I'll move this card down that I want and it'll cost me a little less. Where, I can see that becoming, a bigger strategy, a competitive one, where it's like, okay, well, I might not want this card, but I definitely don't want them to get the card that's crossed, so.
Right, yeah, exactly. And especially if you think you might be wanting to go fight that other Witcher or Mage, you might be like, I really don't want that person to get that card in their hand because it does a lot of damage, so I'll take this other card that maybe is not, super awesome, and none of the cards are crud. Like, some of them are better than others, but yeah, I like that too. I think it's a neat strategy they have. One thing I don't think I mentioned this about the cards is they're kind of multi-use cards, because not only do you use them in fights, but you also use them to move. So they each have a symbol down at the bottom that'll either be forest, mountain, or water. Or there are some wild ones that have all 3. But like, if you want to move to a forest location, you have to discard a forest card or another card plus a gold, or I think 2 other cards. I don't think I ever chose to do that because it seems so costly to me. But so you might be like, okay, for my next turn I want to do this, so I'm going to get this card out of the deck in my hand, even though doesn't have like the combat abilities I want necessarily, but I really need to get over here. So I like that it gives you all those choices, in addition to these things where if you have the Mages and the Witchers, it's like you could go kind of either way on that. But I think it's interesting. There's a lot of cool choices with that, with the market row. And you only really get, for the most part, you get cards at the end of your turn. You have to take a card no matter what. If it's a 0 cost, you can just take it. If it's a 1, you have to discard a card from your hand. If it's a 2, you have to discard 2 cards from your hand. And then you get that card into your hand. So that's great, because I will use this next turn for sure. Or maybe you won't, but you see a value for it down the road at least. Yeah. But it's really smartly done. And then of course you use those cards for combat. Talking about the combat, this particular deck building game has a system in it that was in another deck building game that we reviewed that we did not like that much in that deck building game. That game was Kamigami Battles, and in that game, what it was is that every card had like a main symbol associated with them, and then it would have like 2 other symbols. So if you play one card, the next card you play's main symbol has to match one of those 2 little symbols on the previous card. You had to create a chain of actions, and if you couldn't do that, then you couldn't play the other card down. And in that game, it felt really restrictive, and it was hard to like play the cool cards that you wanted to play. But in this one, it not only does it feel, I think it's easier to do, like each card has a main color, and then it will have a tab if you can add, a card.
It may have a tab.
It may have a tab, yeah. So if it's like a red card and has a purple tab, then the next card you play needs to have like the main color be purple. et cetera, et cetera. Some of the tabs will have like damage or something that you do if you can make a chain using it. So, so pretty cool overall. And it doesn't bother me at all because thematically, I think it makes sense. Like, oh, I'm going to play this and that's going to be like the attack, but then I'm going to, you know, I have to spin around and do like a block, but then I'm going to change that into like a spell thing. So it makes sense for the fight. And sometimes you can't get that much off because, you know, you get one and now the monster's going to attack you. Like it makes sense to me how it's playing out based on that system, whereas it didn't really in Kamikami Battles that I recall.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the major difference, if I'm remembering correctly, is in the Kamigami battles, like you had to discard your hand. So what, you know, so if you couldn't, you might have a really awesome card in your hand, but you can't get it to work in the combination of the other cards that you have. Plus, there was a hand size limit, so you're really restricted in the amount of combos and what you could do in your combos. In this game, you keep the whatever cards you don't use. So you might have a really awesome card that you just can't quite use in that combination, but you can plan ahead and be like, okay, well, I can't use it for this combination, this hand, but the next time I can probably use it. And so you can kind of strategize that. The other difference is that the amount of cards that you draw in isn't like a limited, like, oh, you're only drawing, or at least in combat, it's not a, like, I'm drawing back up to 3. It's based off of your combat level, you're going to draw a certain amount of cards into your hand regardless. So you have a higher chance of being able to do a combat and having a little bit more control over what card you're using in your combos.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. I am just shocked because I think when I first realized it was doing that in the rules, I was like, uh-oh, like this didn't go too great for us comic. I'm just, it's interesting how you could take the same mechanic and not like it in one game. Mm-hmm. You put it in another game and suddenly I'm like, this is actually cool. I like how this goes. Yeah. It's smartly done. And I think it does help that when you get your card at the end of the turn, like you put it into your hand. Yeah. So you at least have that control over your next turn. Granted, you know, down the road you'll have to shuffle it and who knows when it's going to come out, but you have some control there. It's really smartly done and it works way better than I thought it would. As far as like the expansions that we used go, the co-op one is kind of a different beast, but like I would probably always play with the expansions that we played with because they just add more options. Mm-hmm. Like if possible, no one would pick a mage or a witcher if we had both of those out. But I want to have those options to pick one of those characters from either side. I like all the cool new cards that the Monster Trails thing adds. And I like that the co-op does have an overarching story because they're trying to deal with the big bad guys storming around. And it's real tough. It's real hard. You don't have a lot of turns to get up to speed to deal with this big jerk.
It's so close, though.
Yeah, one more damage. And what's annoying about that is I thought back to things I did. I was like, dude, if I would have done this one thing differently, we would have had the damage.
Yeah.
Anyway, regrets. But yeah, but even when I'm playing, you know, if we're playing the co-op one, I still want all those things, and when we're playing competitive, I still want all the other ones too. So I don't think you necessarily, we'll talk about that probably more in Final Fantasy. I don't think you need all these expansions, but having played with them, I don't see why I wouldn't include them, at least.
Yeah.
So.
So I'm gonna do this a little different. I'm gonna give this 3 different scores.
Well, 3?
3 different scores.
Give it 10. 10 from 1 through 10. If you hate Witchers, and you hate fantasy, and you hate board games, and you hate deck building games, you get it to 1. Yeah.
So I'm gonna give it 3 scores. Base game alone. No expansions. I would probably give it a 6. I do enjoy the gameplay. There are some parts that I feel kind of drag. The monster fights start to kind of get a little redundant, in my opinion. And so, like, you know, I enjoy it, but but especially with there being no female characters, it just kind of makes it so that like it's a game that base game alone, I would play it, but it's not necessarily a game that I would be like, I wouldn't be the one picking it out.
Gotcha.
Co-op, I enjoy it. I enjoyed it more. It's very hard.
It's very hard.
And most co-op games are, so there's that. I think co-op, I'm gonna give it a 7.
Okay.
I do enjoy it more. I think the co-op, I would probably enjoy it more if a higher play count. But 2-player co-op, it's okay, but we have a lot of other co-op games I would rather play. But as a competitive game with the expansions that we've played so far, I'm gonna give it an 8. I enjoy the mages, but because of my playstyle, I think I like the witchers more. I did play as Ciri when we did the co-op, and I really liked being able to play as her. So I wish there was more female witchers, but with the lore and so that might not be a thing. But but I did enjoy it. And at 2-player count, I really enjoy the competitive over the co-op.
Right on. Okay. I'm not going to spread out my numbers quite as much. And here's why. We've talked about it a number of times. I agree not having female Witcher at even 1 in the base game is kind of a problem, but I still bought the game. So, granted, I probably would not have if there had been no other women somewhere, just because I think that's cruddy. But, I like the base game. I like what the expansions we played with added to it. I can't even decide if I like the competitive or the co-op more. I think they're just, despite having the same mechanics behind them, they feel different. Mm-hmm. Like the competitive is more like you're kind of wandering around doing what you feel like, and that's fine because you're trying to do certain things sooner than other people, which is so cool. The competitive or the cooperative game, you have a goal and you don't have that many turns to get it done. So it's strangely just a really different beast, and I've been struggling with this, trying to figure out which one I like better, and I can't honestly come up with an answer. I think I just like them both. They're just different. So, I do think that the expansions, whichever ones you get, I think add a ton to this game. I don't know that you necessarily need them, unless again you want the women in the game, which I should have done that. Anyway, but I think the base game is great. I enjoyed the solo game, but like I said, just the ones we played with, I'm always gonna want to incorporate those, at least most of them. I think they're pretty neat. So yeah, I'd say you probably want to get the expansions too if you can. But I am bothered a little bit by the issues with there's not an emergent story that comes up, which is something that I kind of figure out I really value in an adventure game. And that's not to say there's no story here. There is. It's given to you in those cards, but your overarching story is kind of, I don't know, it just doesn't feel as strong to me. So I am also going to give it an 8. I really like it however we choose to play it. I think it's awesome. It's using one of my favorite mechanics. It's in a world I like. I did play through Witcher 3. I played some of Witcher 2, and I played just a tiny bit of Witcher 1, the video games. But I don't think it matters because it's 100 years before it. It's whatever. Sure. But yeah, I would happily play this again. It looks so daunting and overwhelming, and believe me, organizing this thing at first was a lot. But I think especially if someone has familiarity with deck building already, there's just a few more things to learn, and I don't think it's that hard to do. Yeah. So
I think if you're familiar with deck building, it's a game that you'll be able to pick up pretty easily. I think if you're not familiar with deck building, the chain reactions might be a little difficult to process.
Yeah, it could be. So this is it's a weirdly very specific niche because it is not like other adventure games I've played because the deck building is such a main mechanism. But I think there's going to be certain kinds of get-togethers where I think this is going to be like a perfect game. I really like it a lot, but it is not overall a perfect game to me. But it is an 8, and honestly, a high one at that, which I think is what I gave it in our initial or our first impression video. I think I also said high 8, and that's still where it's sitting. And maybe once we've tried those other expansions, maybe it'll even get higher. Maybe I'll be like, oh, now this is where like the really beauty of the game comes out when we add this. I don't know. But today, with those expansions, which I do recommend, but you don't need them. You don't need them for it to be a good game. It's an 8. To me. You've heard what they are, so I mean, you decide. I don't know. I think it's a good game without it, but I'm not going to play without the ones that we played with in general. So.
As a female, I don't like it when I don't have a chance to play as a female character.
I think that's totally reasonable. That's totally fair. Absolutely. Completely understandable. Again, if that had been what the whole Kickstarter was, like, here's your characters, they're all dudes, I probably wouldn't have got it. There's so many good games out there, I probably would have been like, yeah, I'm not going to support that decision. And I almost wouldn't have anyway, because it bothers me that you have to buy an expansion to get that.
Yeah.
Bad choice. Bad choice. Fix it in 2nd edition whenever that happens. 10 years from now. But that's what we got. We have an 8 and a 6, 7, 8. So, but you heard the reason, so you can kind of decide where you fit in that niche. So let us know in the comments if you're interested in this game. Did you back it? Are you going to try to track it down now? Are you going to try to avoid it like the plague now? I want to know all that stuff. Are you going to try to play it completely out of order like the first season of Witcher? And I don't know if they did it in the 2nd season or not, because I haven't watched it yet, because it's not a kid-friendly show. There's kids around. That would be interesting to try. Probably not good, but it would be interesting. Let me know in the comments. I'm always very curious. But I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please hit like and subscribe and click the little bell icon so you can know about the next time we put out a video. Otherwise, look forward to see you all around the table again at All Games New and Old.
Bye.
It's okay, I can't really make fun of you for the 3, because I think I did that with G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
I think they were like 2 points apart each or something like that. Like I had a 3 and a 5 and a 7. So, yeah.
And you're like very like, if you like this, if you like that.
Yeah.
So.
Which is kind of, I mean, to a point that's silly to do, because like, if you like games like For Northwood, you might like For Northwood. But, there were certain things I felt that were relevant in that case to do it.
Yeah.
But anyway. And that's Wart Talk with All Games New and Old. I hope you enjoyed that. Do you have warts? Let us know in the comments. Don't send pictures, depending where they are. I'll look at a knuckle wart. Nothing say below, like, here. Like, keep it. That's you. Hey, you made it to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you like it, share it, and click this button to subscribe. If you like that one, you might also like this one.
Or this one.
I cannot believe what I did in that one. Holy cow.
I can.
Of course you can. All right. Anyway, we'll see you around the table.
Bye.
Bye.